Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the stress you've been running from your whole life wasn't chasing you, it was guiding you. Imagine discovering that every heartbeat, every moment of panic, every heavy breath was actually a message, an ancient code your mind has been trying to send you. If stress is the storm, then this documentary is the lighthouse. What if the greatest psychologist who ever lived, Sigmund Freud, Carl Gustav Jung, Viktor Frankl, Carl Rogers, Albert Ellis, Csikszentmihalyi, Goleman, were trying to give you the map to your own peace, but no one ever showed you how to read it? Today, we decode that map. Stress is not just pressure. It is a story written between your mind, your body, and your identity. And throughout history, the greatest psychologists have tried to decode this story, each one revealing a different truth about why humans feel overwhelmed, tense, or emotionally overloaded. Their ideas come together like pieces of a puzzle that, once assembled, reveal a single image, the true nature of stress. Sigmund Freud believed that stress comes from conflict, an internal battle between instinct, morality, and social expectation. In his view, whenever you feel torn between what you desire and what you believe you should do, stress rises like steam trapped inside a closed container. Freud saw stress as a signal that something hidden, something you refuse to acknowledge, is demanding attention. Stress, for Freud, is the voice of the unconscious knocking on the door of awareness. Carl Jung took this idea even deeper. Jung believed that humans experience stress when they betray themselves, when they live a life that doesn't match their inner truth, when they deny their authentic nature. The parts of yourself that you hide, the shadow, do not disappear. They gather weight, they create tension. Jung saw stress as the friction between the life you show the world and the life your soul wants to live. For him, stress is not a malfunction, it's the pressure created when the psyche tries to grow. Viktor Frankl, who survived the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust, believed stress was tied not to pressure, but to purpose. He argued that humans can endure almost any pain as long as they understand its meaning. But the moment life loses meaning, even the smallest challenges become unbearable. To Frankl, stress is not an enemy, it is a spiritual compass. It points to the areas of your life where you've lost connection with what truly matters. Carl Rogers believed stress emerges when the image you have of yourself breaks away from who you really are. When the ideal version of you, successful, calm, confident, separates from your real experience, tired, uncertain, overwhelmed, your mind enters a state of friction. Rogers saw stress as the emotional distance between authenticity and expectation. Healing begins, he said, when we stop performing and start being. Albert Ellis looked at stress from the angle of logic. He believed we suffer not because of events, but because of the beliefs we attach to those events. According to Ellis, stress intensifies when we tell ourselves, I must be perfect, I must not fail, or everyone must approve of me. These irrational expectations crush the human spirit. So for Ellis, stress is born not from life, but from the stories we tell ourselves about life. Csikszentmihalyi, the researcher who introduced the concept of flow, described stress as the opposite of immersion. When you are deeply engaged in something meaningful, time disappears, doubt disappears, fear disappears. But when tasks are either too difficult or too easy, your mind is pulled out of flow and into chaos. Stress emerges when your abilities and your challenges fall out of alignment. The cure, he believed, is deep engagement, not escape. Daniel Goleman, famous for emotional intelligence, explained how the amygdala can hijack the brain, overwhelming logic and generating intense stress reactions. According to Goleman, stress becomes dangerous when emotions move faster than awareness, when you are reacting before you even understand what you feel. The key, he said, is not to eliminate stress, but to create enough emotional awareness to prevent the hijack. These psychological perspectives converge into one truth. Stress is a message, a signal, a form of communication. It tells you that something inside you, your desires, your fears, your values, your identity, your purpose is asking for attention. But modern stress is different. It is amplified by comparison, overstimulation, social media, economic pressure, identity confusion, and constant uncertainty. Our biology is ancient, our world is not. And this mismatch creates a new kind of psychological storm, a storm the old masters warned us about without ever seeing it. Freud would say your unconscious is overwhelmed. Jung would say your shadow is starving. Frankl would say your life lacks meaning. Rogers would say you're disconnected from yourself. Ellis would say your beliefs are irrational. Csikszentmihalyi would say you're out of flow. Goleman would say your emotions are running the show. And when you listen carefully, you'll notice they're all correct. Stress is not a single phenomenon. It is a symphony, and every instrument matters. You are not broken for feeling stress. You are human. Stress is not a malfunction. It is a message. The question is, are you willing to listen? Stress is not random. It is precise. And to truly understand it, we must go even deeper into the minds of the psychologists who dedicated their lives to decoding human suffering, tension, and inner conflict. Their theories, though created decades ago, are more relevant now than ever because modern society has amplified every single psychological trigger they warned us about. Freud, for example, believed that humans live in constant tension because our instincts collide with the rules of society. In Freud's time, these rules were strict but simple. Today, society doesn't just impose rules, it imposes standards, lifestyles, identities, and expectations. You don't have one superego controlling you, you have millions. Every scroll on your phone introduces you to a new ideal that you're expected to live up to, a new body type, a new financial standard, a new social value, a new way to behave. And while the world celebrates this variety as freedom, Freud would argue it's the perfect recipe for chronic stress, because the more ideals you absorb, the more internal conflicts you accumulate. Freud's theory explains why people today feel overwhelmed even when nothing major is happening. The stress is not external, it's internal. It's the friction between the person you want to be, the person society tells you to be, and the person you actually are. Jung, on the other hand, would say that the age of social media has created the largest collective shadow in human history. We hide our insecurities behind filters. We hide our confusion behind motivational quotes. We hide our fears behind achievements. But the shadow does not disappear just because we post a perfect picture. It grows more powerful. And when you suppress too much of yourself for too long, stress becomes inevitable. Jung believed that the parts of yourself you repress will return one day with more force, demanding to be integrated. This is why many people today experience stress that feels mysterious. They don't understand why they feel drained or anxious or overwhelmed. The reason, according to Jung, is that the life they live is too far from the life they genuinely want. Viktor Frankl would look at modern stress and say something even more profound. People are not overwhelmed because they have too much to do. They are overwhelmed because they do not know why they are doing it. Modern life is saturated with activity but starved of meaning. You can work, travel, socialize, chase goals, build careers, gain followers, and still feel empty. Frankl predicted this. He said that when a person cannot find meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure, power, or validation. But these substitutes never satisfy the deeper human need. So, stress grows, not from pressure, but from emptiness. Carl Rogers would observe today's world and see a crisis of authenticity. He would say that people are stressed because they are constantly performing a version of themselves that does not match their true inner experience. The more you try to be the ideal version of yourself, the farther you drift from who you really are. This distance becomes emotional strain. Rogers believed healing begins the moment you stop pretending. Albert Ellis would look at today's culture of comparison and say that irrational beliefs have multiplied. People tell themselves they must keep up, they must succeed, they must impress, they must not fail, they must not fall behind. Ellis would argue that stress comes not from reality, but from these rigid internal demands. If people learned to replace "I must" with "I prefer," their stress would drop dramatically. Csikszentmihalyi would say that modern life pulls people out of flow constantly. Notifications, distractions, multitasking, endless choice, all of them interrupt the mental immersion necessary for well-being. Humans evolved to focus deeply, but society rewards constant attention switching. This creates a permanent state of micro-stress that accumulates over time. And Daniel Goleman would warn that emotional hijacks are stronger today because we are constantly overstimulated. The brain cannot differentiate between a real threat and a digital one. Every ping, every alert, every piece of bad news can trigger a stress response. Without emotional awareness, your brain reacts as if you are in danger, even when you're safe. If this documentary helped you see stress differently, imagine what your life would look like if you understood every signal your mind sends you. Tell me in the comments, which psychologist's perspective made you understand stress in a new way?